I don't want to mess up your video.
It's okay.
Are you sure it's okay if we're in front of the slides?
I mean, they're not going to show up on the video. It's
Oh,
too
okay.
bright, so it doesn't matter. The audio is what
Gotcha.
Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Vamos a ir dando inicio para ir respetando un poco el tiempo y la agenda que tenemos para el día de hoy. Muchas gracias por tomarse el tiempo de acompañarnos, familias quienes están por acá, también algunos de los clientes con los que hemos estado trabajando este verano y otros miembros de la comunidad que nos van a estar acompañando a lo largo de la presentación. Para nosotros es un gusto dar inicio a esta presentación, a este simposio, que es el número 31 para este programa, con un impasse de 2 años que nos dio la pandemia por ahí. Y encima de eso tenemos el gran honor de tener por acá 2 de los docentes fundadores de este programa, Linda y Bob, que nos acompañan en el día de hoy, y la nueva decana del Departamento de Arquitectura y Planificación de la Universidad de Buffalo, Julia, que también nos está acompañando el día de hoy. Gracias por acompañarnos, gracias a los profesores que nos han apoyado este verano. Una de ellas no está acá, entonces por ahí está quien nos tuvo en la primera parte, y bueno, el faculty para la segunda parte, que es Randy, quien nos acompaña el día de hoy. Just to summarize a little bit of what I was saying, thank you everyone for joining us, families and assisted event community members that are here, the ones that will be joining us throughout the symposium. It's a great pleasure for us to give this short introduction to a program that has had the opportunity to work in this community before. This is going to be the 31st program for us, with a break of 2 years in which we had the pandemic, unfortunately. But 31 years of working on a number of different projects, and we just yesterday we're looking over the timeline and the number of projects that we have been able to reach out throughout this program. For this summer, we had 2 faculty. One of them is not here, Stephanie Kramer, and the second half is Randy Fernando, who is joining us today on this symposium. We'll have 2 projects the students were working. We had a group of 9 students, so 2 projects directly working, and then we'll also have a chance to dive into one of the seminars to discuss a little bit of that. We'll also get the chance to go and have lunch at the new park, the linear park right next to the soccer field. So we invite everyone to join us for the extension of the whole morning. Families will be hopefully joining us there. Aparte de lo que, hablando un poquito de la agenda de la mañana de hoy, tenemos 2 presentaciones de los muchachos. Tenemos un grupo de 9, como ustedes saben, o algunos de ustedes saben. Entonces tenemos 2 presentaciones, después vamos a hacer una presentación con 2 de los proyectos no tan directamente vinculados con organizaciones locales, pero sí con el programa como tal, y lo vamos a cerrar con un almuerzo en la plaza, que por dicha el clima está pareciendo un poco mejor que lo que estaba los días antes, con la inauguración de lo que es el Parque Lineal, que fue el proyecto que estuvimos trabajando este año directamente en construcción. Sin más por el momento, yo creo que voy a pase a Randy. So without anything else to say, I will give hand it to Randy.
Thank you. Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos. Lo siento porque cuando yo hablo español es no bueno, pero yo comprendo mucho, so I'm trying, I'm practicing. So I think today I just wanted to welcome you all here today as part of the Same Futures program. So I'll try my best to speak a little bit in Spanish, but I have to look at my notes. Hopefully by next year I'll get a lot better. Mi nombre es Randy, soy profesor de la Universidad de Buffalo. Estoy emocionado de estar aquí nuevamente para presentarle al grupo de futuros sustentables. Este trabajo solo es posible con el esfuerzo conjunto del instituto, la comunidad y nuestro estudiante. Eso es todo el español que tengo por hoy. No preguntas en español por So I was just saying, I think it's amazing that we're here today. As Anibal was saying, we're kind of past 30 years, so I'll talk about that a little bit later today. An incredible program that started here 30 years ago, plus 30 years ago, and we fortunately are able to have some of those members here today, so Bob and Linda, and joined by our new dean, Julia, as well, from the University of Buffalo. So there's kind of a merging of the new guard and the old guard, which is very exciting today. And we'll talk about that. Sorry, I didn't mean that old. So we'll talk about that legacy a little bit in the afternoon, but but it's a pleasure to be here representing Sustainable Futures on behalf of UB with our students. We have a really great group, and I'm very excited to see what they're going to present to you today as part of the final symposium. And this only happens when we have the collection and the work of the community, partners, the institute itself, and hardworking students. So I'm very grateful that we are in an environment that supports each other and is willing to have these really tough conversations so that we can create a better future for ourselves, for the next generation, and also just for the environment and the world that we live in. So without further ado from me, I will pass it off to our students.
Hola, saludos. Hoy vamos a representar el proyecto Casa para Todos. Mi nombre es Nadie.
I'm Alexis.
Me llamo Jordan.
I'm Vikram.
Aquí hay el tema de introducción. Introduction. The mission and vision of the project of Community Fund is that they want to develop sustainable development in Monteverde, and they do this with the vision engaging with the community. We quickly want to highlight the values that the Community Fund has, which is to create, and this acronym has different components, which is community, connection, resiliency, equity, equilibrium, empathy with the community, regeneration, and really thinking about the future for sustainability developments. Here, this is quickly impact graphic, highlighting the impact that the community fund already has. They are already invested over $1 million in the community through different community efforts. This is from environment, social culture, youth, working with economical intelligence, working with women especially, and also climate change. Objectives for today.
So with the rise of short-term rental services like Airbnb, kind of long-term rentals for local people in Costa Rica is kind of hard to obtain. So kind of our proposal is to create an affordable housing project that begins to explore themes of sustainability, community, and culture.
After studying the mission and vision of our client community fund and studying the context of Monteverde and the community itself, we fixed 5 core principles for our project. So in this housing projects, we are trying to create a sense of community engagement in our housing project by creating community spaces like community garden and laundry spaces where they can engage with different activities. Secondly, we want to address the new locals who are coming here and who cannot afford the rentals here. So we are making it affordable for the new people in Monteverde. And thirdly, we want to initiate a new practice, like sustainable practice in our housing project. That way we can create a new, we can preach a new message to the community. And for that we are engaging in 3 environmental systems. First of all, using solar panels for energy and using rainwater and rainwater recycling system, and then creating waste management system in our housing project. Fourthly, we are using local materials for our housing project. That way we can also push the sense of sustainable practices. And last but not the least, we have to address the climate of Monteverde exclusively and 2 seasons of this region.
So this is our SWOT analysis, kind of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and constraints within the project. And we aim to we kind of tackle a lot of these, but we really want to focus on sense of community, sustainability, and kind of climate as a whole in Costa Rica.
Contexto. Just to start in context, this is the population that currently exists in Monteverde. Obviously, you could see throughout the years, the population in Monteverde has gradually increased. Here, we are talking about potential renters in Monteverde. We really wanted to focus on young locals and elders and the potential that people can grow within these homes. And also thinking about how we could utilize that for our design, for a diverse group. This is the same graphic, but looking outwards in Costa Rica, we're seeing that that's a bigger market overall. Here's a quick illustration of showing the vegetation that Monteverde reserves have. And we can see that there's a lot of movement in Monteverde based on just location as a tourist group. So that really promotes economy. So there's a lot of growth and potential for development here. Quickly here, this is just a graphic indicating daily salaries. In Costa Rica, here we can see a range based on skill sets, right? The higher skill you have, the more you get paid. And here is also based on education, salary based on the month, based on your education level. The higher education you have, the better. Here we can see that Monteverde actually has a higher population of people that either have license or a bachelor's.
So here we see in this diagram, you can see like we have in Costa Rica, you need a specific amount of earning to qualify for the social housing, and then there is like the average market price for rentals. And so there is a huge gap between these two criteria. So we are trying to bridge the criteria and create and fill that gap. So we are designing the house so that the people who who are in this middle ground, they can afford their rental housing in Monteverde specifically. So we asked our clients, so what can be our budget? Like what can the ideal rent for the housing project? So they said $7 per square meter. So that way we designed 3 different kinds of units in our housing projects. First of all, studio, and then 1-bedroom unit and 2-bedroom unit. So for the studio, we fixed like 330 square meters of space that gives us 111,000 colones, and then we have 1 bedroom for 133,000 colones, and we have 2 bedroom for 222,000 colones.
So we were not getting excited with this project, so kind of as an exploration, we decided to look at the whole Monteverde landscape as a whole and see kind of the different terrain types. So there's flatlands, there's more typical terrains with a little bit of slope, and there's kind of the extreme slopes in the hills. And we wanted to kind of explore the different options of how our building can be orientated and kind of sit on these sites through different practices. So this is kind of a map that shows kind of landslide susceptibility. So we have to acknowledge here that kind of landslides are a thing, and we want to understand where our building can be placed and kind of design in more of a reactive way, or not reactive, proactive way than reactive way.
This is our presentation.
So this is our this is House for All, and it's a 13-unit 13-unit apartment building that explores ideas of pockets of community, communal gardens, and water collection. And the entire site as a whole takes up 1,208 square meters, and that includes the parking lots and the terracing in the back.
So this is the lower level plan. It has 3 units and they're all connected by a front balcony, and they're accessible through the 2 stairs on each side with rain gardens adjacent to those. This is the ground floor plan. These are 6 accessible units. And then there's the main larger communal space in the center, and you can see the shape of the building is kind of directing everyone's view towards this middle space. There's also these 2 social stairs on both ends with smaller, more intimate communal spaces, and then we have the main corridor adjacent to all of these communal spaces and entrances to each unit. The second floor, there's 4 units, each having their own private back patios. There's also a smaller shared laundry space for those 4 units, and then the shared balcony in the front overlooking the communal spaces below. So this is the roof plan. It shows that we imagined to have street adjacent parking to the right of the building. We have car parking, motorcycle parking, and bike parking. And then the entire site we decided to terrace to deal with the existing slope terrain and also deal with water management. So we have rain gardens on the terraces in the back to slow down that absorption of water and also attract pollinators and things. The roofs are sloped in different directions to guide the water to cisterns below or to rain gardens in the center here.
Okay, so for unit types based on our scheme, here we have the studio. We have a total area of 30 square meters. We're talking about a bedroom that's 8 meters right here. We have the social space being the kitchen and living room being 16 meters. Then we have the bathroom being only 5 meters and the balcony being 8. Here you can see in the studio that the bedroom and the kitchen are not separated at all because we don't have a wall there. That's why it's a studio. And we're talking about $111,000, no colones, sorry, in this for this type of unit. Talking about the apartment with 1 bedroom, here we have an additional wall compared from the studio one, and we're talking about 133 colones for renting. Here it's a little bit bigger rather than 30 meters squared. Is 36, so you have like 6 meters more. And we're talking about a bigger bedroom, which is 10 meters here. The bigger kitchen as well, which is going to be 20 meters. And the balcony is the same size, which is 5 meters. And the balcony is a little bit bigger by 1 meter. So you're paying a little bit more for a bigger space. Here is a 2-bedroom apartment. This is about 122 colones. And it's actually double or the size of the studio, which is 30 meters. The first bedroom is quite big, which is 12 meters. It's the biggest space. We have a primary. Then the secondary room is going to be 10 meters, similar to the studio. And then the bathroom, it's a little bit bigger, which is 6 meters. And we have a similar balcony spaces to the other ones, which is 8 meters. And the living room space is 28 meters. And here you can see like there's clear circulation throughout the whole viewport from the entrance all the way to the balcony space. Here we're just talking about different interest groups for each studio type and apartment type. Here we can see overlap within those groups. We thought about young people, elders, potentially that don't have families, young families that are just starting as well, and even just young professionals that need a location similar to the idea of like they want to work from home and they want that extra office space as well. Or even roommates that want to just live together.
So this is showing the distribution of different unit types, the blue being studio, the yellow being the 1-bedroom, and the pink being the 2-bedroom. So on the lower floor there's one of each type of unit. On the ground floor we have 3 1-bedrooms, the 2 bedrooms on each side, and the 1 studio. And these are all accessible units. And then on the second floor we have the 2 2-bedrooms and the 2 1-bedrooms in the middle. You can see the 2 2-bedrooms are shifted forward. This is to create protection for the main corridor on the floor below, and also the shared balcony continues that like overhang. It also kind of just creates a separation between the private balconies and an offsetting on the back side. This highlights the communal spaces on the ground floor, the green being the spaces and the orange being that like communal circulation. So the main focus of our project is this big open air covered space with a communal garden, communal lounge, and communal laundry. Below we have a list of different fruits, vegetables, and herbs we imagine being planted in these boxes. We have additional planters in front of the ground floor units. And then the lounge space, it's kind of adjacent to the laundry, so you can wait there while you're waiting to do your laundry, or also just like sit and socialize and enjoy the view. We have these smaller pockets of community in the social stair. This is kind of still like a social space, but a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate. And then, as mentioned, this main corridor is going through these communal spaces just to allow like viewing into these communal spaces and encouraging that involvement, because as you're walking past, you're seeing these spaces, it's encouraging you to get involved. And then the orange again, just those social stairs going up to the second floor. And then the second floor, we have a smaller shared laundry for these 4 units. And then again, this front shared balcony that has viewing into the communal spaces below. These are kind of just some inspiration pictures of what we imagine these communal spaces to be. So these being that corridor, this being the lounge and laundry, community garden, smaller shared laundry on the second floor, social stair and that balcony kind of looking down and seeing that visual connection. This is showing the overlap between different circulation types. So the orange is the primary circulation from the entrance to each unit, and the green is showing the circulation from unit to communal spaces. And you can see here and here, there's kind of like a big overlap between that orange and green, and that's really important because the overlap of circulation, these spaces have viewpoints into these social spaces. And that's really important because that's the goal of our project, to create this connection between community and these spaces. And then the arrows inside the unit just shows unit circulation. On the second floor, again, you see this overlap between the main and communal circulation on these social stairs. Because we kind of want to make these like a hub, and like we have these really long landings for just like socialization and interacting with your neighbors. And then the residents on the second floor have the option of using their shared laundry space, or if they on the balcony they see below, they see like the lounge, the larger communal space, they have the option to go down into it.
So here is our first section. So we're cutting the section on the upper building. So here you can see we don't actually have like a continuous building. There are like actually 4 different buildings separated by social stairs and communal spaces, and connected by balcony and shared roof. Here you can see like the distance from like the ground to the roof, and also we have these gaps in between the units for cross ventilation, because we know this area gets very humid and we need that cross ventilation in our design. And we also avoided any kind of apertures or openings on east and west side. Here you can see, so to avoid that morning and afternoon light, and we want to like create that sense of shadow and light in our design. Next one. In this section, we're cutting it from the middle, and you can see how we are like terracing the side because we know Monteverde, most of the places are sloped. And we have also in this region, you can see this is the accessible floor, where we have both units connected by the corridor in the middle, and then we have other units going down and going up. And we have created we have designed it the way so that everyone can have a clear view of the surrounding, because Monteverde is beautiful, you know. And we have created the terracing in the back so that we can retain the water that's coming from the back, and we have like rain gardens here to enhance that water retention. And also you can see we have designed obviously we will have retaining walls, and these retaining walls are separated from the building so that we can have a gap, and we can have that light and ventilation in the area. Next one. This one is showing like the offset of units. So we are cutting from like this end. So these 2 ends have offset. So that way we are covering this like the main corridor area to some extent, and this roof is like covering it as a whole. And then we also have this beautiful balcony in the back. So this was the idea of like offsetting the units, and you can see we also have like the bike parking on the accessible area and things like that.
Alright, so this is our structure. Our primary construction materials are steel, concrete, stone, and grout. We have steel beams and columns. We have a stone and grout retaining wall, and our foundations are pier foundations, and they're concrete. Building upon the structure, we add on to the roof. So the roof structure itself is going to be a space truss system. We kind of wanted to express steel in some way, kind of celebrate it within this project. Kind of adding on to it, the next thing is to show where the floor plates go. The floor plates are just put on top of the steel beams. And finishing out the structure, we have a corrugated steel roof decking that is put on top of the space trusses to finish out the structure. In elevation, we're gonna talk about the actual skinning and the cladding of the project. So this is a side elevation, and we can begin to see we're putting wood on as the cladding. The wood is going to be infilled into the steel, so the steel is going to be expressed externally. And the roof itself has a small gap, and this is to let ventilation into the center courtyard itself. This is the front elevation, and the same materials apply, where we have the steel, the wood itself, and then you can begin to see kind of the retaining wall and kind of how the stone will be imagined. And these are kind of showing off the textures of the materials we want to choose. So as you can see, we have the wood, we have the corrugated steel, and we also have the rock wall itself. This is kind of one of our inspirations for the project, kind of creating something that's visually light. We don't want anything too massive. We want to kind of let the building breathe in a sense, and kind of explore the idea of these pier foundations and the roof shape as a total, kind of allowing ventilation into the center courtyard.
Okay, to quickly talk about interior design here, things that we wanted to include in the inside of these units is wood. We wanted to actually introduce a material that's natural and sustainable within the design, because it brings some warmth into that. Similar to the wall colors, right? We also wanted to have tinted earthy colors, so it gives that warm reflection when the light hits. And we also thought a lot about storage, right? If we're talking about smaller units, how would storage be? So we thought of walls and shelves, we thought of furniture that has storage underneath, similar to this bed, and also, the big wall mural shelf, because that allows you to really pack things and make it look organized and still look very presentable when you have people over. This is performance.
So this is kind of understanding where the sun comes from here. It's a lot different. We're all from Buffalo, so it's completely different here than it is in Buffalo. So as Bikram was talking about, this helped us begin to place windows, understand where we want the light to come from, and we don't want light. So this is kind of a windrows, understanding where the wind comes from, and this kind of helped us understand how to orientate the building and where it wants to protect it and where it can be more open.
Something to note that we understand that prevalent winds come from the northeast.
This kind of shows the sun, the wind, and the actual ventilation within the building. So each unit has some sort of cross ventilation, which is here, and the wind itself is hitting back there, and kind of the sun begins to enter these spaces as well. This is a section that kind of shows ventilation. There's kind of two ways to access ventilation with like this unit where it's window, or it could be a sliding door as we saw in some of the project where it's a sliding door and a window to allow for ventilation.
Now about the environmental systems. So as we said earlier, like we want to propose some systems for the housing project so that we can reach the sustainable practices. So first of all, we want to have like solar panels on the roofs of this housing project. That way we did some calculation and we need like only 300 square meters of roof. That's like half of the roof we have in our housing project. And that way we can save like 8 million, around 9 million colonies per year. And if like we have another option, obviously, like if you think like that's too much, we can also use like only 150 square meters of roof for those solar panels. That will also like save a lot of money, and also it will be like self-sufficient in a sense that we don't need any electricity from the grid. So we have followed some precedents. So here we have sewer settlement in Germany. So what they did, like what we want to do is quite similar, and they use their whole roofs for solar panels, and that way they are like self-sufficient in energy, and they also gives energy to the grid if it needs. So here we have like a quick call out of like how we are imagining. So we are imagining like all the solar panels can just go in the middle area of our roofs, and that way we can just like create our own energy. We did some calculations for the water management too. So we know Montevideo it rains a lot. So what we want to do is like collect the rainwater. That way we can like have enough water for car washing, flushing toilet, and gardening. And if we also suggest you to use a grey water recycling system. That way we can save a lot more water, and we can save this water for emergency or for dry seasons. We followed the Bullitt Center as a precedent for this study, and we see like what they do. They collect the rainwater and they use it in their building, and then they collect the grey water and recycle it again, and they run this cycle for 5 times. Then they dump the water in the rain gardens they have. That way they also promote the water retention system in their project. So we are also trying to do something like that. So here is a call out of like we'll have the cisterns here underneath the social stairs, and we don't need a lot of space for that, and that way we can collect enough water, and we'll also have rain gardens to where we so that we can retain the water even if we are like dumping it on the ground. So in this diagram, you can see how we are like getting the water. So on these roofs, this water will go directly to the rain gardens around our stairs, and that way the rainwater is not just sliding sliding down the slope. And this is like the way we are collecting the rainwater for our own use. So this will all go to the cisterns down this corner, and the water that will come, like the storm water that will come above from the mountain, that will also get retained by the terracing and the rain gardens we have in the back. So now talk about the waste management system. We want to create a system that gathers all the organic waste from the housing complex and creates compost out of it. That way we can, first of all, we can obviously like mitigate the waste problem in this complex, and then we can also create our own compost that can be also used in the community gardens we propose. And this way we can also create a better sense of community engagement, where like all the tenants are gathering and creating their own compost and using them in the for the garden. And you can also see like we only need like only 1,000 kilograms of compost per year for our garden, so we'll have a surplus of organic compost, and if the tenants want or if the client want, they can also sell it. So we followed this precedent for this study, Greenbelt Sustainable Living Community in Furman University. It's a dormitory. What they do, they collect their own organic waste, and then they make their own compost in a designated area. Then they use that compost in their own community garden, where all the students get involved and create a sense of community. So here is a call out of like we want to have like designate one space for the organic waste collection, and that can be there where everyone like collects the organic waste, and we can like have them separated, and then after the compost is ready, we can use them in our garden.
So this is kind of a recap of the project as a whole. So just a recap.
Now about now we are trying to visualize how the housing project will look like. So here is like the overall how we are imagining the complex will look like in Montevideo. Here is like the main community space where we'll have a shared laundry space, lounge, and community garden where people will come and get engaged very easily. Here is the stairs that going down to the lower units. We have the rain gardens on both sides of the stairs. This is like the back side of our building, where we have this rain garden in the back, and we have like the stairs for socializing, and we have this pocket of community where it's like more intimate and less a bit separate from the main community. Is like there's some interior design, and we say this is how we are imagining. Like we'll have like sliding doors for the balcony. That way we can penetrate the the wind and light into the space.
This is also the 2-bedroom, right? So that's why you see a linear living room and kitchen.
This is also interior where we can see
The other side.
the other side of this same space. This is like the studio apartment we're imagining, where we'll it's enough space for 1 person or 2 person, and it's a more cozy space. And the view of the studio apartment. And this is like the main corridor between the 2 separate buildings. And this, you can see like the balcony and like the offset of the buildings are covering the corridor in below. And the side and the view.
This is the main entrance.
This is like the community space from the front view, and you can see like from this view, like from the balcony, you can also like have a visual connection to the community space. Overall view of the project again.
And thank you for that.
I just wanted to break throughout before we go into the presentation, just to introduce that this is a real and a tangible problem. I mean, the community fund raised enough. That was the idea to respond to this need, to the need of the client, but to the need of the community, because we really truly are facing tough times when it comes to rent spaces here in Monterrey, housing in general for families that want to live here and that have to leave up to an hour away from here to actually find a house, affordable housing, if they're working here. Nada más quería romper un poquito antes de entrar al área de preguntas, mencionar que esto es un proyecto que si bien es cierto lo trajo el Fondo Comunitario, es un problema, una problemática muy real para la comunidad en temas de encontrar casas de alquiler o casas en general, con personas que se tienen que desplazar hasta 1 hora desde Monteverde para poder costear los costos de eso. Es sumamente caro. Y bueno, creo que para los que somos de acá eso no es ninguna sorpresa, ¿verdad? Pero sí es una realidad muy clara, muy tangible para todos. Preguntas, questions, comments?
I have a question. Well, first of all, great job, very comprehensive and thoughtful. Just, there are actually clarifications. So there's no mechanical heating and cooling in your project?
No.
No.
And that view actually is of the entrance, so there's actually parking.
Yes, the parking is in the back. Can you give the first view?
You just don't show the images where you're parking. So I know it didn't have a site.
We have the parking like somewhere here. It's just
Okay. And I know you didn't have a particular site, but the way you're imagining it in your renderings, it seems like it's outside of the village, town, community, I don't know. Is that what you're thinking, or is it more where we tapped into walkable situations?
So what we were thinking currently is that a lot of the homes are kind of in a mountain. So that's why we picture it in a mountain, and there's a main road that connects you to the walkable, accessible walkway. So
it's within, you're imagining within the kind of infrastructural system.
yeah, like you would have to go into a private road to the complex, but you're able to access that walking from there. Yeah.
And my last question is, in your beginning you mentioned using, I don't know if you call them local materials, and then you outlined steel and concrete mortar. So help me understand how you're pitching local materials. I just don't know what that means.
That's just more like on the construction side of what's common here and cheaply available to some extent, kind of what is like normal for I guess, what I've seen here, construction-wise.
So Monteverde is quite different than any other region. So here some kind of wood are very rare and we have to like get it from other cities or other countries. But like some steel, like columns, these kind of things are very available, concrete is available. And some like in sense of like local materials, we have certain kinds of wood that we can use for cladding or like even for skin structure. But like as a structural material, we don't have like any like actual local materials that can be used for like structural purposes.
Thank you. Well, I thought it was a really great presentation and great. This,
So tell me again, what is the footprint in terms of square meters, and how many people you envision living in the complex? I'm sure there's a maximum limit, and one person in a studio or two, but did you calculate?
Yes. So like the main, or the whole complex is 1208 square meters, and we are envisioning we'll have like 34 to 40 people highest in this complex living as a tenants.
And that number also includes the parking spot.
For each person, okay.
As well
Do you
as-
have places to charge electric cars? or
We're
cars
ideally,
that-
two of the parkings is meant to be for electric. Any questions?
In Spanish,
Sí, 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 mira.
English is not big. Yo creé una compañía turística en mi casa rodantes y también tenemos el concepto que está allí compartido y lo que me gustaría es saber cómo etapa de financiación en el que está esto para pues, empalmar en alianzas. Ya nuestras casas están expuestas en el restaurante Turín Costa Rica, tenemos una por ejemplo, y también tiene sistema de captación de agua de lluvia, tiene sistema de desechos sólidos, tiene toda una propuesta de jardines polinizadores. Vamos a empezar a crear una para niños también con techos verdes, así que encuentro muchas similitudes que me gustaría como articular para justamente redundar en esfuerzos compartidos. Y si bien nuestra propuesta es para turismo principalmente, pienso que hemos visto justamente como ellos lo destacaron aquí, con Relations for All the Job, todo un problema importante de habitación acá en Monteverde y me parece que es un problema realmente en muchísimos países por el paradigma de construcción en el que el mundo ha entrado, ¿no? Entonces, nada, ofrecer la posibilidad de articularnos también con nuestro modelo de diseño y nuestra capacidad de construcción hoy para pues saber cuándo se va a desarrollar esto ya de manera concreta y que podamos unir esfuerzos en fases de construcción, que podamos unir también en modelos de construcción, en buenas prácticas, porque ya nosotros lo estamos haciendo, tenemos 2 casas en este momento en muestra, estamos construyendo 4 casas y nuestra proyección de construcción es 70 casas en todo el país. Y podemos, nuestra meta también es la posibilidad de construir para la habitación, dada pues, el problema sensible que hemos encontrado acá, que no lo teníamos en el radar, pero bueno, la realidad es más compleja que siempre lo tenemos. Y pues, sin duda, nosotros también pudiéramos aportar en la línea que están desarrollando.
So I'll summarize a little bit of the question and comment, I guess. So they brought a small company that actually has set bases here in Monteverde, actually in Turín, which is a town nearby, and a lot of their proposal is this small tiny houses, RVs, that you can move from one place to the other. And they're asking and wondering, where's the financial stage on this project? If the community fund in this case has established like deadlines, points, where are they leading into? Trying to make sure that both efforts, the effort they have as a company, as a family moving their business, might be able to join with a larger effort on the idea of supplying the needs of this community when it comes to housing. So I guess that would be a question more for Ricardo, more than you guys, related to what's the intention of the community fund when it comes to the financial opportunities, next steps on this project. So Ricardo.
I will answer in Spanish and then try to summarize. Bueno, un poco la intención de esto es precisamente porque identificamos en la comunidad este tema de la problemática de vivienda y nosotros como fondo comunitario pues es un tema de interés, ¿verdad? Y también que una aspiración, al menos este es un esfuerzo conceptual, no es como que hemos llegado a una fase de financiamiento ni mucho menos. Es un esfuerzo que nos viene a ayudar a la toma de decisiones, a decir, ok, nos embarcamos en esto, no, ¿verdad? Porque es algo complejo y pues implica mucho esfuerzo. Pero qué bueno saber que estás en esa dinámica y saber que estás anuente también a colaborar, porque yo creo que el siguiente paso es afinar el lápiz con los números, ¿verdad? Entonces, pero sí, es una etapa muy exploratoria.
Sí, lo digo sobre todo porque todo lo que hemos financiado nosotros ha sido a través de una campaña de inversión colaborativa con 54 mujeres en 13 países, así que también tenemos una metodología de inversión colaborativa como para pensar esto y justamente abrirlo a diferentes personas en el mundo entero para que podamos financiar justamente este proceso conceptual que lo ayuda así que al servicio también de
So I was telling her that basically this is like a concept, yeah, and we are not into the financial part yet, but this is a quite good, how do you say in Sumo?
An input.
Yeah, it's a great input in order to go deep in this evaluation.
Bob?
Thank you. It's very lovely, and I agree. Very comprehensive. What I worry about is the difference between precedents from Germany, Seattle, North Carolina, and the Latin American and Central and South American context that we dwell in here. And I hope there are precedents that we can draw on that are more consistent with that kind of cultural difference. The second thing is really very much what Ricardo was describing, is that the financial and policy framework that you approach affordable housing with creates a set of assumptions that preclude some things and enable other things. So you've described a system of there's social housing, there's market housing, and we got the middle, which means we don't have all of it in that. And one could imagine it would be terrific to not create pockets of wealth or poverty or in between, but rather we dwell together in a reciprocally supportive way. And where are the examples and policies there? So the design isn't independent of the financial and policy tools. That's part of the paint you have to, the media you have to paint with. And so what I was missing in this was what's the policy framework that enables this? There's some examples of multifamily housing in the zone, mostly tied to some of the teacher housing efforts. How are they doing? And what would have to be done to make those come into the aspirational set you just described, for instance. So it's like, be where you are. You're trying to do that with materials, recognizing they don't manufacture stuff here, they got to bring it in, but they do bring in some more some than others, so you're there. But what I'm saying to you is, what you did is really complicated, and there's still more complexity to deal with. And finding ways to really talk across those policy boundaries as media in the project give the community foundation more tools to work with as they advance a concept like this.
I'm gonna translate that to my response to part of the second question.
Yeah, good.
Nada más como para responder, hay dos preguntas, tal vez resumiéndolas. Una de ellas está relacionada al tema de precedentes o antecedentes, y algunos de esos precedentes que los muchachos estuvieron mostrando se estaban refiriendo a diferentes partes de los Estados Unidos, inclusive Europa, hasta qué punto eso podía tener una relación directa con la arquitectura un poco más local, a nivel cultural y a nivel climático y demás, y hasta qué punto esas referencias fueron o están respondiendo a condiciones culturales y ambientales de la zona acá en Monteverde. Esa es la primera pregunta. La segunda pregunta se relaciona a un tema de política. Entonces él está hablando, bueno, tenemos un modelo de desarrollo, un crecimiento residencial de una forma como tal y estamos proponiendo un modelo de desarrollo un poco más, más concentrado. O sea, estamos buscando un modelo en donde tenemos multifamiliares en un solo lugar. Eso no es lo que comúnmente usted ve aquí en Monteverde. Entonces estamos haciendo una propuesta distinta a la tendencia que se ha venido dando y hasta qué punto eso está, responde con algún tipo de política local respecto a lo que eso podría implicar, sea digamos a nivel de cómo puede socialmente eso ser aceptado o no, cómo se puede sentir la gente viviendo en un multifamiliar versus vivir en su propia casa con su propio espacio, o también cómo está involucrado eso en la política local. Y esa política local tal vez va un poco dirigida a un tema regulador, que es un poco lo que quería mencionar. So for the second question, I think one of the things that we have been seeing, and we spoke a little bit about that, is the pressure on land here, and the prices of land have scaled up terrifically, in particular anything near to Monteverde or close to Monteverde. So one of the things that I think this project responds in a way is thinking about land is very pricey. So if we can concentrate, or we can have a bit more vertical growth, if we can have this pocket sort of, we save on money when it comes to land. One of the things that I mentioned in one of the practices with the students, it was we need to make sure that this is multi-general. So we are not only having one generation, but we have multiple generations living here. And that is responding to the need for both youth and elders. Elders is eventually, here in Costa Rica has inverted. Right now, we have a very small population here. So we need to make sure that all elders have a place. And then someone is pampering them, hopefully with the families, but if that is not the case, it might become an opportunity for youth, which normally have less resources. And so, well, I mean, some of the money will be partially financed by both, but this multi-generational complex might allow that to happen. So we can have multiple generations, hopefully not splitting, and that's one of the things we also try to find rent that is not exceeding a limit or capacity of people, young people that might be coming here to work as a waitress or waiter. They might have just, maybe $500 or I don't know, $700 per month and a base salary to pay rent plus, they have kids, tuition and other things. So trying to make sure that this is not an elite type of thing, not a gated community, but more a community concept itself. Y nada más como resumiendo, yo creo que esto es un poco también que va dirigido al tema del plan regulador o política local de regulación, pero el crecimiento de Monteverde no es ninguna sorpresa. El costo de la tierra es algo muy caro, entonces tener estos desarrollos residenciales un poco más concentrados podrían permitir bajar el costo, la presión a la hora de pagar por tierra y tratar de mezclar y buscar oportunidades para que múltiples generaciones puedan vivir en un complejo de apartamentos. Entonces, si uno es una persona mayor que tal vez tiene una pensión o tiene un colchón un poco más grande que una pareja joven que está comenzando, puede ser una oportunidad para que ambos se complementen a nivel económico e inclusive a nivel de cuidado. Entonces puede mezclar múltiples generaciones, puede mezclar idealmente estratos que no sea clasista, que eso no es buscando, digamos, una renta muy alta, eso es, más bien es todo lo opuesto a eso, buscar una solución a un estrato, a una gran parte de la población que realmente no tiene recursos. Ricardo, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Can I add something?
And we still need to respond to the first question.
Yeah.
Yo creo que lo abarcaste bastante.
It's actually for your answer, like thinking about the design and scale, right? We actually look into the social housing in Costa Rica, and we scaled all our units based on that to make sure we're actually near the budget or in the range that Costa Rica already has precedents shown in the region.
You're making an argument about density relative to land value as opposed to the smaller unit that's individual across space.
Yeah. Linda?
I have a question for the student, and to frame it in a way that says that what you've done here is just really very, very good, and you tested an idea, and now you know what has to be included as you continue to work on it. And I want to come back to two comments that Einbal said. One is the cost of land, which leads you to the idea that maybe moving up even in the earthquake zone, it seems to be really important. And by the way, if you don't know, in the city of Buffalo, we have great precedents and examples of how in a single family neighborhood in the city, suddenly there'll be an 8-person apartment, and it's done right in that place. So you have some precedents to think about how you densify something that's kind of going like this, and then you can densify it in that perspective. So my question for you is that when listening to the conversation, what would be the next steps? If you were the architect on this now, so I've tested it, I know it'll work, I know what all the variables I have to do. What is the next step for you, if you were continuing on this project?
We did want to limit the type of units that we had at 13 to 12, considering that we were not thinking about a huge complex, right? I guess the bigger picture, if we're really thinking about a greater scale, we would be talking about how can we maximize this, right? If it's not just like this unit, but if it goes vertically or even multiple in different locations in the building. I think that would be the next best approach if we want to really house the population in need.
So adding to that, I'm not sure if you understood, but like you can see, like we don't have like a continuous building. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. That way we have like I think 7 buildings in total, which are all like connected by the roofs and like the balconies, the terraces and everything. So what our idea was, like we can just take maybe 1 or 2 buildings from here, and like suppose we don't have that amount of land, we have only half of it or like 1/4 of it. So we can just take 1 or 2 buildings from it and just place it on that specific kind of like a small land. We can still have all those things we are imagining. We can have the community garden, we can have the like different kinds of unit, we can have the social stairs and everything. So that was one of our like goals to create some kind of scheme that can adapt with with the new set of restrictions or the constraints we will have in future. And also for the next steps, we obviously need some kind of more information or like from the client, like or data, like this is their budget or this is the land, this is kind of things they're imagining. So having those new set of data will help us to actually navigate which direction to follow.
Entonces, para traducir rápidamente, entonces la pregunta de Linda estaba muy direccionada al tema de la conversación sigue como cuáles son los siguientes pasos, y estamos hablando de un tema de este proyecto y qué podría significar, cuáles creerían ellos como estudiantes si fueran contratados como arquitectos para este proyecto natural los siguientes pasos. Y la respuesta un poco dirigida al tema de escalabilidad, o sea, un tema de si esto va a continuar, en dónde podría ocurrir. Este proyecto arranca sin un sitio particular, porque el fondo no cuenta con un terreno, entonces si ya contáramos con un terreno, habría que ajustar las condiciones del terreno al edificio y el edificio a las condiciones del terreno, más probablemente la segunda. Entonces es un tema de escalabilidad, es un tema modular, eso es lo que mencionaba Vique, que digamos una de las cosas que que los estudiantes pensaron a lo largo de todo el proceso es que si no se cuenta con los recursos o el terreno, perfectamente podría ser uno de los módulos. Son 7 edificios por igual, pero podría perfectamente modularse y acondicionarse a las características del terreno o a la cantidad de tierra con la que se cuenta. Entonces puede ser escalable. ¿Qué más? Creo que por ahí estaba un poco mencionando, creo que respondiendo un poco a la pregunta, voy a poner las cosas que mencionaban, es el tema de que sí se ajustó a proyectos sociales en Costa Rica. Entonces, que todas las características que se hablaron, si bien es cierto, son ejemplos de otras latitudes, sí se ajustaron a realidades locales nacionales. Me parece que eso es importante ajustar. Vamos a tener que irnos moviendo al siguiente proyecto. Podemos hacer más preguntas durante el receso, entonces durante el break podemos continuar la conversación. We're going to move along with the following presentation. We can have more questions and comments throughout the break, coffee break. Thank you very much. Tal vez para dar una introducción general a lo que es el siguiente proyecto. Mencionar que este año tuvimos una oportunidad interesante, los dos proyectos hasta cierto punto son muy hipotéticos. En un caso, el caso del fondo comunitario, porque el terreno aún no existe, entonces si contáramos con el terreno y pudiésemos hacer un complejo de este tipo habitacional, ¿cómo podría ser eso? Y los estudiantes se dieron a la tarea durante estas últimas 9 semanas para hacerlo. Y yo creo que esa parte de soñar, ambicionar es muy sana y nos ha llevado a múltiples éxitos como comunidad a lo largo del tiempo. Hace tiempo atrás soñamos en qué pasaría si el centro de Santa Elena se convirtiera en un espacio público, más allá del tránsito de vehículos como tal, que es actualmente el uso. Eso nos llevó a un concurso. En cierta forma, ese concurso fue una oportunidad para demostrar un poco lo que había sido el trabajo. Eso fue de hecho una propuesta que habíamos trabajado con el gobierno local, imaginando lo que podía ser el centro de Santa Elena. Algunos hemos soñado con eso por mucho tiempo, de que ese espacio puede ser algo más que una calle de movimiento vehicular completamente. Eso está al cierre, ese concurso está al cierre del momento, de toda la última etapa, la etapa final. Y como parte de esa etapa final tenemos por acá algunos invitados especiales de parte de la agencia GIZ, no sé quiénes más tenemos por ahí, pero miembros de la comunidad y gobierno local, obviamente, a quienes les damos la bienvenida para que puedan ver la segunda parte. Este proyecto está conectado a todo este espacio público del centro de Santa Elena, porque lo que nos estamos imaginando es qué pasa si el edificio municipal se mueve a otro lugar, qué podríamos hacer de ese espacio, de ese terreno y actual edificio que todos conocemos como lo que es la municipalidad local. To summarize it, I'm just giving a short intro in terms of what happens when you dream big. And a while ago we dreamed about like Santa Elena being a public area. What if Santa Elena downtown is not only a place where cars drive by, but what if it can be a public space used by many others? Out of that, we were able to participate in this competition. As part of the audience today, we have GIZ, which is a corporation agency that is financing all this process. And so what we're going to be seeing today is complementing a lot of what we are actually looking as a boulevard. And this project is dreaming of what if the building, municipal building, current municipal building, becomes something else. And that something else is what the students are going to be sharing with us. Thank you. And leave it off to you.
Hola, bienvenidos. Gracias por tomar el tiempo de estar con nosotros. Me llamo Ana.
Me llamo Leo.
Me llamo Christian.
Me llamo Juliet.
My name is Angela.
Project.
Entonces, para empezar, nosotros estudiamos un poco de las ideas que la municipalidad tiene para los próximos 4 años. Una de esas ideas es para tener espacios más abiertos para que los ciudadanos puedan participar y disfrutar.
So during our time here in Costa Rica, we've learned about what this building has been in the past. It started as a dance bar and then became a bank, and it's now the municipality building. And so we've also learned about the multiple robbery attempts that occurred on this site throughout the years, including the one that happened on March 8th in 2005. We've also learned about the 7 people that lost their lives on that day during this event. And for this reason, we were asked to create a memorial in this park to really embody, be a space for them.
And we plan to design an open park to utilize the green space that once existed in Santa Elena. And the property should provide local community with new social space and offer a memorial to the building past history.
Entonces la población de Monteverde es aproximadamente 5.500 personas en el cantón de Monteverde y hay como alrededor de casi 300.000 turistas que pasan por Monteverde cada año. El sitio está en una locación bien comercial, que aquí ves las calles primarias, todo pasan por Santa Elena y el sitio.
We learned that public spaces in Santa Elena are lacking, and we believe that adding a public green space in this site will be a really great attraction, especially because of this site being in a very high commercial area and in a very central location of Santa Elena.
We also think that in addition to the soccer field public space that we are also working on, these two projects together will enrich the public space opportunities in Santa Elena by a lot.
Entonces, como nosotros somos estudiantes de Búfalo, queríamos hacer un análisis del sitio. Nosotros aprendimos que tiene mucha exposición de sol del sur y unas restricciones que tuvimos son las paredes de la bóveda, que son hechas de acero, y las paredes que usan como pared de arte. El bóveda se va a quedar para simbolismo del memorial. Entonces, el análisis y trabajando con la municipalidad, nosotros hicimos objetivos que todas las propuestas que vamos a hablar van a tener. La primera es espacio comunitario abierto, por lo menos 35% de zonas verdes, un memorial para la historia del edificio, espacio de descargo, debería ser accesible y tener espacios para sentarse.
So moving into the site itself, we first took a look at the existing traffic patterns in downtown Santa Elena, and as you can see right now, it is a one-way street around this triangle around the site, with the bus stop located to the right of our site. And then with the future boulevard plan, we look at the traffic patterns. You'll see that the road in front of our site will move to a two-way street, and that will take off street parking in front of our site. So both of our schemes will look to create a pull-up area for drop-off in front of our site, and you could also see that the bus stop will be relocated to in front of our site. You don't notice that. And then looking further into the boulevard plan, our group took a deep look into the plan to hope to take inspiration from it, and now in the future inspire development of the plan. We also took a look at the land use in downtown Santa Elena and noticed that most of the buildings are catered towards tourists and not towards the local community. We also noticed that there is a lack of green space and open space for the public in downtown Santa Elena, so we hope that our proposals will hope to increase that. And coming from Buffalo, we took a look at the climate in the area, specifically the sun patterns and prevailing winds. And lastly, we took a look at the green space in downtown Santa Elena, hoping to improve upon it and looking specifically at this bio corridor along the river.
So along with all of that, we looked at how people are currently moving around our site. We noticed that the sidewalk just kind of stops at that corner, creating a very unsafe crossing of the street in both directions. So as part of our design, we want to help create a better and safer crossing and a better circulation of that corner.
And also, while we're starting the environmental opportunity on the site, we also wanted to take the opportunity to study the movement of the water that currently exists on the site. So all of the water on the site is not managed, and is directly mainly to the river that is north of the site. All the proposals will address water on site in different ways that make sense of the scheme.
We also looked at the inside of the building and what walls are already existing on the site. This was because we were asked to keep part of the building as in our design, possibly to serve as the memorial. So this plan really helped us look at what walls are in the best location to be kept, including these vault walls down here that exist in both schemes we will be presenting today.
So the name El Bosque de la Esquina comes from the organic form of the park, which brings a part of the cloud forest to Santa Elena. So earlier we designed multiple iterations of 3 different designs that address topography, water management, and general characteristics of the designs very differently. And the one in the middle was chosen from our earlier design process, and we chose to improve more on this and move forward with this So people like several aspects of this design, particularly the use of 7 trees as the memorial, and maintaining the vault that exists already, and the way we handle parking and the different uses of plants and the organization of it. However, we also needed to improve certain things in our design here, such as the boulevard connection to the site, making the park and pavilion more accessible, and more focused water management, which we all try to incorporate in our next design approaches.
So taking our previous designs and the feedback that we received, before we went further into design, we wanted to come up with a list of words, elements, and ideas that we wanted to include into our design. So here they are, most importantly, green space, native plants, having a pavilion, having a space for gathering. We also made a collage of some of the precedents, elements, and trees and plantings that we wanted to include in our proposal before we went forward. So moving into the trees, we went through a very thorough process into selecting the 7 trees, looking at hundreds that grow here natively in Monteverde. We consulted with Daniela, our tree expert here at the Institute, and we evaluated the trees based on height, width, the animals they attract, and looked to pair 7 trees with 7 different unique functions for the park for the people to enjoy. So here are the trees paired with 7 different functions, and I will pass it on to Juliet to go into specifics.
So we designed these to have every tree represent a different person that died on March 8th, 2005 during the bank robbery. So our first tree is the Osteothera monteverdensis. It's the tallest tree on the site, and it exists within the pavilion space. It attracts the quetzal, the pava cristalda, and pajeros campañas, along with lots of other species. And this is an example of what the pavilion space could look like with the tree growing through it. Our second tree is the Myricene cordiosea. It will grow within the vault walls at the front of the site. It attracts the huida, yiguiro, and the carpintero. This is an example of the space it could look like as it grows through the vault walls, really showing how the site has moved on from the events that occurred here. Our third tree is the Acanistis arborescens, or the guatiti tree. It will exist right at the front of the site when you walk in. It will have a bike rack surrounding it, really to have people, it really serves as an entrance to the park. This is an example of what the bike rack could look like, as it really encompasses the tree. Our fourth tree is the Ficus pertusa. It exists within an art installation where lights surround the tree, possibly solar lights or lights that can change colors. It attracts the euphonia, the buero, and the murciélagos. This is an example of what the possible art installation could look like. You can also use different artists from around Monteverde to design this or other art installations. Our fifth tree is the Synthrolexium quadantum, or the Dama tree. It has a bench that surrounds it to really bring people together at this space. It attracts abejas, pava cristadas, and chlorophonias. And this is an example of this space. Our sixth tree is the Ceratopia obtusifolia. It attracts carpinteros, calibris, and renietas. It exists within a big pollinator garden, so lots of other plants will surround it, as well as one of our water management systems called bioswales. This is an example of what it could look like in a garden. And our seventh tree is the Guaya galabra, and it exists within a rain garden on the site, which is another water management system that we'll get into. And it attracts mosquiteros, yiguiros, and renitas. And this is an example of what it looks like growing in a rain garden.
So transitioning into water management, our group wanted to retain as much water as possible on the site, as the current site sheds all this water into the street. We used a baseline of 100 millimeter rainfall in a day as our goal for water retention, and looked into various systems to help attain this goal. So the first of those systems is bioswales. Bioswales are naturally planted drainage dishes meant to move water throughout the site. They use native plants to both slow and absorb the flow of water. here you can see an example of one at the Bonito, a park nearby. Our second system that we use in the schemes is a rainwater garden. These are meant to collect runoff water and, like the spells, use these native plants to help absorb the water. And the plants are also important in attracting pollinators and creating the jungle-like feel that we want inside our park. And here you can see an example of one here at the Institute. And then the last system that we will be using in our schemes is a retention pond. And like rainwater gardens, they're meant to collect water. But unlike rainwater gardens, they can hold a much larger capacity of water and such. Not a lot of plants are able to grow in them. We found that the banana tree is one of the plants that can grow, as you can see here at the retention pond here at the Institute Banana Tree Center.
And next, I want to introduce like the boulevard connection to you. So, as we introduced earlier, these are future plans of the boulevard close to the site. So we're trying to make connection between the boulevard and the park. So we designed a lifted table using different material to slow down the car and makes this part pedestrian friendly as much as possible. It's here. So currently the road is going up and going down. So we plan to lift the road here by the ramp, and it will use the different material from asphalt here. And all the Y-shaped intersection is lifted on the same level with the sidewalk, which is here. And as shown, we're using brick pave. For the pedestrian and the art street. So, and also like natural stone pave for the other area of the table in order to lower the car speed, which is here. And we have the lights on the pillar to like separate the table and the boulevard to remind cars in the night. And the slope of the ramp is 1 to 16. And this diagram shows all the contacts, including buildings, the park, and the boulevard.
So having described the memorial trees, the water systems, and the boulevard connection that are common among all the proposals, here they are. We created two different schemes that dealt with the pavilion in two different ways. In our original scheme for the Bosque de la Esquina, it had a pavilion that was not accessible up top. Well, it had a second floor, but not fully accessible. So we created two different schemes that one is accessible from the top, and the other one is not accessible to the top. The first scheme does not have a second story, but more or less is level with the street, whereas this scheme, the bottom floor of the pavilion is below the street level, so this scheme has more or less a better water management system, and it creates more open space in this one, which is more plantings, and more open space both within the scheme and on the inside.
So this is the first design option we have. We added accessible terracing at different levels by adding more earth to the side. And we tried to combine this with the organic forest-like character from El Bosque de la Esquina.
And this is the cut plan of the park. So the site itself is 22.7 meters by 22.5 meters. And the pavilion is here. It's surrounded by 2 rain gardens and 1 retention pond. And all the green space connected by the brick pave, like, are accessible here. And from the site plan, you can see the circulation of the park. The path here is sloped, which leads to all the terraces. And each terraces have a water body, including like rainwater gardens and also like retention ponds. And also people can look down from all those terraces, and they can see green space. As you see, the proposal has less occupiable green space, but it has more plants that create jungle-like environment.
Entonces aquí el pabellón está en el centro del sitio. También hay como un camino que hace una experiencia muy lindo de como un bosque. Y pues aquí está la bóveda que ojalá puede como atraer a más humanos para entrar aquí en el parque. Cuando tú estás entrando a la otra esquina, puedes ver adentro de la bóveda. Aquí está la zona de descargo para personas que necesitan caminos accesibles. Estos son los paredes que estamos hablando, que lo vamos a hacer como paredes de arte. Y aquí te muestra todas las zonas del sitio.
Here you can see how some of the plants will be laid out in scheme along the terraces. We specifically chose native plants to attract birds and pollinators to the site. Here you can see the placement of the 7 trees along the site. We've got Acetea, Monteverdentis in the pavilion, and then the Guar Glabra in the rain garden, and Myricin Corsea in the vault. And lastly, here's the water flow on the scheme. It is set up so that most of the water will flow into biospills or rain gardens, and that you can absorb the water on the site. The scheme uses all 3 of the systems described earlier, and the combination of these systems will provide a really cool experience for parkgoers. You'll be able to visibly see the water management during a rainflow, and whose plants in the rain gardens will contribute to the jungle-like feel of the scheme.
So the pavilion for this design is above ground and has one single floor. It follows like an organic shape like the rest of the park. It's 10 meter long and 3.6 meter wide in the middle, and it has a total area of 37 square meters, and it can host around 50 people. We understand that this pavilion has a smaller footprint, but that is something that was intentional because we believe that it would allow more open green space throughout the park and also encourage people to explore outside of it instead of always being in the pavilion. So for the material choice, we were thinking about using teak wood for roofing and flooring and the cladding of this structure. And we were thinking of using steel for the structural columns and roofing structure as well. We selected these materials because these are, one, very readily available and cheap to use, but also because we believe that the use of wood primarily would blend in with the forest-like characteristic that we're trying to go for. There is also some little use of reinforced concrete at the back of the pavilion where the bathroom is to have like more structural support as well.
Entonces aquí tenemos el fuerte mirando al pared del banco. El camino va alrededor del parque para ofrecer diferentes experiencias. Entonces voy a empezar con el bóveda, que va a ser el memorial, y después tenemos aquí un lugar para sentarse y charlar con unos amigos, y después de ahí hay un espacio dedicado para el ambiente, que ahí puede ofrecer más como un lugar de un bosque. Aquí el corte está mirando a esta pared de aquí, que también va a ser pared de arte. Puedes ver aquí que el pabellón tiene lugares dedicados para el agua y las plantas, y eso te hace sentir como igual que estás en un lugar que está cubierto, y hay muchas personas, todavía estás en un bosque, igual que... Entonces aquí está una vista de la entrada del parque. Aquí puedes ver que hay estas terrazas que tú tienes que caminar por el parque para tener esa experiencia. Y después aquí te muestra cómo trabajaría la pared del arte. y también muestra cómo el jardín de lluvia puede traer muchos espacios verdes y ojalá ser como un punto de atracción. Aquí tenemos una vista de una de las terrazas que está cerca de la entrada, donde estamos aquí. Y igual que estamos en Santa Elena, queríamos tener esa sensación de estar en un bosque. Aquí estamos en el pabellón. Me imagino que aquí podemos tener clases de baile o actividades sociales. Podemos ver aquí que hay mucha sombra de los árboles que también ofrece un ambiente bien cómodo. Pues aquí es como podía ver en la noche. Nosotros queríamos que el parque se sentía bien seguro y también no afectar mucho el ambiente. Entonces ahora vamos a empezar con la propuesta segunda. Entonces aquí el piso de arriba del pabellón es accesible. Hay grande área de espacio abierto y la topografía desciende hasta el pabellón.
So from the cup there you can see, so actually we cut from the first floor of the pavilion, and in this case we have like a bigger pavilion. And the reason is that the roof here is accessible, and there's a ramp going all the way up to the roof. And here you can see because of the roof is lifted up, so part of it is confounded. So that's why we have two green gardens here to deal with the water management, and we can have more water and like plants here. And also we have like permeable pave all over here. So actually for this, in this case we have like here you can see and all different like 7 trees. So for this case we don't have like much jungle like random plants, but we have more like accessible green space. For example, like here and here.
So in this scene, the pavilion is located more in the back corner. This is due to the sinking underground of it, so we have more space to ramp down and to ramp up to the pavilion. It's also, the roof itself is slanted, so it's an easier walk up. The vault walls also stay in the seam similar to the first one. You've got your drop-off parking located in front of the site, very near both the down path and the up path, so easy access to the pavilion. The art walls in this seam are located on the edges of the site, as well as this retaining wall here acts as an art wall and could really bring more local artists into the space. And this is where the green space is located. As Leon said before, there's 2 bigger areas here. And then up top on the pavilion, there's more of a planting situation.
So you can see the plants in this scheme placed along the edges here and along the pathways. It's the same plants as the earlier scheme, again, meant to attract pollinators, birds. The layout of the trees for this scheme is more or less the same as the other one, with the month rhodanthes in the middle of the pavilion, trees in the rain garden and in the vault, and then the other trees laid about most of the scheme. And then the rain flow for this scheme only uses 2 of the systems as shown earlier because there's a much larger proportion of rain gardens in this scheme. And those will contribute to the jungle-like feel as they will be filled with plantings like in the first scheme. And then this scheme also has a larger area of bioswales which will act like rivers sort of during a rainflow and hopes to bring part of the cloud forest into the center of the view.
So this pavilion also follows an organic form, but this is much larger. It's 40.3 meters long on this side and 5.8 meters wide from the internal points. And it has a total area, just like on the first floor, 185 square meters. And this can easily host more than 50 people at once. And as we mentioned, that this has like a double floor, the roof being accessible. People can also access that roof and be separated from large events and gatherings happening on this floor. Like the pavilion before, we are also thinking of using the same materials such as teak, wood, steel, and concrete walls for structure. Here we also have some railings and railings covering railings for safety of the users on the upper floor, which are also going to use made with steel. Sorry.
Entonces aquí el reporte está mirando al banco, a la pared del banco. Entonces bien similar como el primero, para la bóveda para el nuevo material. Y después aquí puedes ver la rampa que está subiendo así suavecito para hacer accesible. Y también vemos que el pabellón tiene un espacio más grande, que puede tener grupos más grandes, y aquí para evitar inundaciones, estos jardines están conectados, como este está más grande, y las biozanjas está conectado a este. Esto ofrece que no va a haber problemas con inundaciones en el sitio. Entonces aquí está el biozanjas que yo estaba hablando, que está conectado a este que está un poquito más chico, y este está conectado al jardín más grande. Entonces para eso tenemos que hacer un puente que es accesible, y también cuando está lloviendo te puedes como escuchar el sonido del agua moviendo en el sitio. También aquí puedes ver que hay un espacio dedicado para que los humanos puedan sentarse, y hay otro espacio dedicado más para las mariposas y los animales y las plantas del ambiente. Entonces, como la primera, esta es una vista de la entrada del parque. Muestra las paredes que están construidas para usar para sentarse, como aquí. Y también hay un espacio dedicado, como te dije, para los humanos, y otro está dedicado para las personas aquí. Aquí pueden ver que esto está más para los animales, y aquí hay una vista del adentro del pabellón. Tenemos un puente que es accesible, y aquí abajo está conectado la vía zanjas aquí hasta este jardín, y ves que tienes una vista bien linda de muchas plantas y árboles. Aquí es una vista de arriba del pabellón, y aquí puedes tener muchas gentes aquí arriba. Y si tú vas a la próxima, puedes ver que en la noche hay una vista bien linda del atardecer, y teníamos, igual como en la primera, usar luces que no afectan mucho el ambiente. Y entonces estas son las dos propuestas, como acá pueden ver que son bien diferentes, pero también son bien similares, porque teníamos que tener la misma función. Gracias.
Preguntas, comentarios. Es un momento para ampliar un poco más la presentación.
I'd just like a clarification. Could you go back to the beginning and show us how this is situated in Santa Elena and how the traffic is working?
Give me a sec. We have a lot of slides.
Yeah, go back. Sorry about that.
All good.
That's fine.
And as in addition to that clarification, I don't understand the boulevard. I don't understand what it's linking. It seems to just go off the page. Sorry, I don't know.
It's
Okay.
It's okay. Here. Let me see. I promise.
Fine, okay.
There's actually a map that shows a bit more of the like overall roads. Let me give you a stage.
I know which one.
That
Yeah.
Wait.
Oh, there it is.
Wait.
Alright.
Actually, there is another one that's
Which one did you?
like the one of
The circle.
like the big one, that one.
So. What was
Okay,
it?
so this
Where's
is
the
the
site?
this is the site in downtown Santa Elena. You can see like the
Triangle.
triangle of Santa Elena, and then this is the greater.
So we're not showing that there, but the boulevard project sits into this road over here.
I have a smaller
This-
map.
Sí,
That one over there.
So,
Yeah, this is the boulevard project from the 2022 overlay.
oh, it was done already in the past.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the 2020.
Yeah, that was work done by Sustainable Futures 2 years ago that we are now taking as inspiration for our project.
And then our work was the connection between the two.
And then the parks.
And so that boulevard, there has both people transportation and car transportation on it at the same time.
The one thing that we're not seeing there, Linda, that refers because this traffic, the way the traffic is circulating was our work a long time ago. We changed, we
Oh,
reversed
yeah,
that.
we remember that, yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
But we're not showing the external roads, which are a big part of the boulevard project. Because the idea is to have sort of like circulation road that goes through the Creativa and the cemetery, and that doesn't show in there.
Well, can you just show me on there where the traffic's gonna go from in both directions? Just,
Yeah, so right in the boulevard project, this road here would turn into a two-way street. And then the triangle where this road and this road is currently one
and you
way.
just don't get in that one third area.
Yes.
Another clarification.
Yes.
Where is the water coming from in all your rain gardens? Because it seems like they're elevated above street level. So what's the water source?
So in, hold on, I can scroll now. I can scroll. So in this scheme, it's, the whole site's slope, this is the high point. So it's sloped down to that corner, so the water is gonna run into them and also from the bioswales that are at a higher level than the rain gardens themselves.
Here, and then all this water here in the shed is the rain.
So but what's the water source of the bioswales? Where's it coming from?
Rain,
Rain.
Just
rain.
During rain.
Is it activated?
Yeah.
It's activated when it's during mainly in rainy season.
So if it's not raining, they'll be empty and full of plants.
Oh, and also for the rain garden, if we don't have water here, actually it will be like a plant.
Yeah, they just look like
jungle space.
Más preguntas, comentarios. Jody.
This is it without water.
Yeah.
And then
Without
without
water.
water.
Gracias chicos, gracias amigos. La verdad que son unos proyectos que el uso sostenible me genera más sentimiento. El gesto de poner un árbol, de estudiar un árbol que sea propio, autóctono de la zona y asociarlo con esa historia negativa y convertir el proyecto en algo de crecimiento, quitar concreto, quitar todo lo que a veces nosotros por una mejor calidad de vida a veces buscamos, sin embargo en algún momento se convierte en algo negativo y convertir a ese centro de Elena en ir convirtiéndolo poco a poco en zona verde, creo que es uno de los proyectos que más me llena de sentimiento. Cuando conversé con Aníbal de esta posibilidad no la visualizaba con tanto amor. Creo que el futuro sostenible y estos chicos en este proyecto es el que le han puesto con más corazón. Si genera sentimiento para mí, porque prefiero amigos, familiares en ese lugar, imagínense para aquellos que estuvieron ahí en su momento. Hoy por hoy tenemos personas que estuvieron en el sitio y que no ingresan a ese espacio por su recuerdo. Y si hacemos eso, si en el futuro hacemos eso, va a ser un lugar donde van a entrar con una energía increíble, con un amor, con una resiliencia sorprendente. Entonces, desde parte de la municipalidad, agradecerles por haber ido más allá de lo que explorábamos, de lo que yo exploraba en el sitio, y pido a Dios que ojalá podamos trasladar esta municipalidad para transformar el sitio en esa visión que ustedes tuvieron. De verdad, muchísimas gracias por el trabajo.
So, gracias, Jody. Translating a little bit what Jody was expressing. On behalf of the municipality, he wants to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to making this project from your heart, because it really transmits that. It transmits a lot of feeling. That feeling, that transforming a bad vibe generated by what happened to a good feeling, where we are commemorating, we are thanking, and we are appreciating the lives of those who lost their lives in the bank. And a lot of those people are not even entering the municipal building nowadays because of the memories that flash back to them. But now thinking about what this will transform, that impression, it will be a really nice opportunity for people to now enter or visit this place with a total different approach and a total different feeling. So he wants to thank you for going beyond what he was actually expecting. We have the municipality. He hopes they're going to be able to accomplish this project soon. Moving the municipality to a different building and having this project taking place as we're currently they are. That's something that we're working really hard, and there is a pretty strong possibility for the municipality to acquire a new building. So that might become actually something that we'll be able to do soon. ¿Alguna otra pregunta o comentario? Si no, vamos a tomar un pequeño receso para tomar café. La segunda parte tenemos dos presentaciones más. Una de ellas va a ser relacionada a uno de los proyectos de seminario que ellos tuvieron, y la última presentación es el parque lineal, al cual vamos a visitar justamente seguido a la presentación. Entonces les invito para que pasen a tomar café. We're going for a coffee break, and then we'll come back for the last two presentations.
Bueno, esta segunda parte, lo que va a hacer Randy es como enseñarnos un poco lo que pasó el año pasado. No sé si algunos recuerdan que fue el 30 aniversario, o le pusimos el 30 más aniversario de Futuros. Entonces, nos va a enseñar un poco de eso y también el proyecto de, bueno, otros proyectos en los que los estudiantes han trabajado, que no estamos solo aquí en Monteverde, sino que estamos empezando a ver otros tipos de cosas, más como en la costa y eso. Y también el proyecto de construcción, que es en el que hemos estado trabajando este año, allá en la plaza de Santa Elena. Entonces, le voy a dar la palabra a Randy. Él va a seguir y yo voy a estar allá otra vez traduciendo, por si yo voy a ir para acá y para allá.
Okay, so again, thank you all for being here. I'm going to make this very quick so we can go have lunch and go to the park and see it in person. But I just wanted to talk about the kind of legacy that we've been leaving as part of Sustainable Futures, which really started with Bob and Linda, so grateful for them for instigating a lot of these conversations and changes within the community, but also creating a program that's like well immersed within Monteverde and the Institute. So this timeline kind of showcases the hundreds of projects that we've been developing over the past 30 years. Last year we got a chance to reflect and talk and have conversations about these projects, where we're headed, where we came from, and how much Monteverde has changed since then. We were just recently joking about how it used to be a series of horses kind of bringing you up and down the hill. Now it's become cars and pedestrian traffic, and it's changed kind of pretty quickly in a matter of a small amount of years, and even since I've been here in 2015. So this is just a quick recap. Last year we got to print some of these projects out, review the client reports, looking at projects from the 1990s up until the early 2000s, thinking about even the library edition, right, which is very normal and common to us, but was part of a Sustainable Futures project in 1997. So just seeing the impact that our planning has had in the built kind of environment here as a part of the institution, and the kind of growth that the institution has had as a result of the topics that we've been addressing. You can also see that connection back into some of the kind of newer initiatives and topics that we've been taking on, like additional green spaces, public projects that are really focused towards the local community. So thinking about the rise in ecotourism and the effects that has on the population here, we wanted to combat some of those issues by providing land back to some of the kind of youth in terms of play structures and also social spaces for the communities that are around these areas. So it's essentially launched a kind of longer investigation into the design build projects that we'll kind of see scattered around Monteverde. This is more just an announcement that we did a lot of surveying last year. We have a lot of data, information, comments from the locals, comments from the institution, comments from the students and the faculty from the past 30 years. It's going to take a lot to sift through, so give us time. But this was mainly just to acknowledge that we are listening, right? We are a program where we listen, we digest information, and we think provocatively about the next steps for our future. So these decisions aren't made lightly, and they happen within the community infrastructure with the kind of staff here at the Institute and also with our influence from University at Buffalo. So the combination of all those things is kind of what makes Sustainable Futures when we think about it as a program. Last year was very packed. We had the ability to celebrate 30 years as a part of the anniversary. We got to do the typical symposium. We had the Central Park event, so another big project for us was creating a Central Park just outside the Santa Elena area so that we can gather most of the town in that location. And we also were able to kind of speak on various topics that are going to emerge in the next couple of years as a part of the symposium called Eco Charla, so Eco Talks. In that symposium, we were able to kind of communicate issues about how to involve artists and kind of cultural practices within the local community into some of the work that we do. We're able to address things like coastal resilience and also talk about how the times have changed from the 1990s up until present day. Some images from the reunion last year of these conversations and kind of exposure to the work that we were able to curate. If you're ever interested, there are dozens of books that are worth sifting through to instigate some of these ideas and thoughts. And then of course, we have to thank the institution for the food. So we're always thankful that they are able to give us the energy to have these tough conversations, intense debates, and these kind of scenes for me are very important because they often become places for casual conversation about really big topics. So oftentimes after these presentations, when we're socially engaged with food, become places where we get to debate and converse and think bigger about the kind of future of these areas and our place in them. So, after those 30 years, we now think about nuevos futuros, so the new future, turning the page onto a new chapter of new people, new involvement, new community organizations, and how we might be able to kind of push this in the next couple of years. So the seminar, I'll just kind of summarize on behalf of the students who've been working really hard on taking on this next topic, which has to do with the climate futures on the coastal area, so thinking about visual resilience as the first stage. So because we're relatively new to addressing this topic, rather than just providing solutions, we are using visual storytelling to be able to address a lot of these global narratives that are happening as a result of climate change. So again, thanks to the students for producing a lot of this work. They're going to be generating a report at the end of the seminar that'll be more comprehensive about some of these issues and topics, but I'll share a sampling of what we did for this topic. So the Sendero Pacifico was a trail that was also developed by Sustainable Futures. So as you can see, we typically like taking a lot of the projects that we presented in the past, and we actually like to redevelop them, kind of re-engage them in the context of today. Fortunately, this project was completed about 2 years ago, I believe, and we were actually able to take the students on that really long hike. So it was about 9 hours. They probably hate me for it, but it was beautiful. It was a great bonding moment, maybe trauma bonding, but we saw some really great sights we got to observe, and then we also got to go down to the coast and kind of immerse ourselves into that location and see the difference from Monteverde down to that area. So the hike was really important in just seeing that gradient of climatic change physically, right, and also visually as we kind of made that walk. So I'll share some images of that hike. We were hoping for a better view, but as you know, we're in the cloud forest, so we saw a lot of clouds. We got to work our way down and navigate through these trails and paths, and oftentimes stopping and observing the local fauna and flora, and just again, understanding the kind of difference of the cloud forest as we approach the coastal area. So we spent a lot of time talking about the biological corridors, the issues with the bellbirds, right, as a species, and oftentimes we don't think about how these larger kind of climatic events that are happening in Monteverde are also connected back to the shorelines down below. So this hike, as we paused and we reflected and we kind of observed, was really about understanding how the hydro cycle, for instance, has a direct cause and effect up in the mountains and then down below. Of course, seeing a bunch of cows as part of the agricultural lands. Seeing the coastline far. This is how the students look every morning when they look at me.
Ouch.
Did they have to walk back up?
No. I would have loved if they did, but that was...
It was a lot of up, not down.
It was a lot of up and down.
I don't know where you're going.
So the main point of this exercise was for us to arrive at the coast. We looked at two different sites, Chomes and Morales, and we're noticing a lot of the differences in the infrastructure, the kind of community, their attitude towards economy, but also towards community in terms of socializing and the kind of political issues that happen along the coastal region. We're looking into things like how the coastal tides were changing and shifting, also their ways of transportation. So this was a taxi that was carrying people across. We essentially kind of spent the whole day walking across the shoreline, looking into the issues or challenges that could get brought to light as a result of sea level rise. Again, thanks to Vikram for a lot of these photos. So we can see this guy's got his bike right on the boat. So it's a very densely packed taxi system that's kind of moving people across the coastal region in terms of mass transit or public transportation. Very different, of course, from Monteverde. We see mangroves acting as a barrier on the site from tidal surges. We noticed the steep kind of difference in low tide to high tide. So we arrived during low tide, but we can imagine that these locations during low tide become accessible for a lot of children who go there to play, but also to source shellfish and food. These are the students out in the waters. We can also see the difference in infrastructure in which they are forced to build on stilts, right, as a result of kind of flooding and the storm surges that occur pretty frequently in those locations, especially during the wet season. So elevated buildings, right, are a pretty common typology in this area. We can notice the kind of remnants of recycled tires as the kind of barriers to, again, break up the energy of the tidal waves. We brought a thermal camera out there to kind of understand the heat difference in these locations as well. You can see in the top left that we talked to multiple locals and just interviewed them to kind of ask them about their daily lifestyles, the challenges they kind of face when it comes to storm events, how it's impacted them, and how it's going to be part of their thinking as a community in the future. We looked into things like how temperature was changing as we were there, the wind directions, coming up from the coast into the mountains. And then we finally took a boat trip onto the waters to kind of navigate from Morales to Chomes so that we can see the site a bit differently, being more immersed into the actual peninsula. So we got to see a cargo ship transferring goods like sugarcane. We saw some fishermen out in the waters. This is the crew on our little boat. And then we were told to get out of the boat and start pushing it. So as a result of a lot of fluctuation with the tidal waves, there also emerged a series of sandbars because of the sediments running down from the rivers. So oftentimes we are challenged in navigating the kind of waters because of those elevation changes. So in some locations we ended up getting into the really deep areas of the coastal area, but when we hit the sand dunes we ultimately had to get out and push the boats back into deeper sea. So these are lovely faces of our students working the boats.
The girls stayed in the boat.
All the girls are very dry. We'll have to talk about that later. And again, just noticing the kind of scenery and aesthetics, but also infrastructure that was created as a reaction to the things that are happening with the waters. So we can see the elevation change from the low tide up onto the barrier here. Another thing that we roped into this trip was the clean energy kind of institution. So we looked into hydroelectric, geothermal, solar, and wind. We got to see some of these plants and how they reacted and how they're operating. The bigger objective of this exercise or field trip was to connect, again, quite directly how water around the Arenal area is getting moved down into the coastal regions, and how it's also providing energy to the country. So through this presentation, again, thankful for Issei for kind of talking us through a lot of these maps. Connecting, again, the country as a whole as a part of this larger narrative instead of just focusing on Monteverde. Of course, because Monteverde is located higher up, we think about the water kind of transitioning down across the terrain into a lot of these coastal locations like the Pacific and the Caribbean. So the development that we kind of have up here and the way that we treat our land and treat the water at the kind of Monteverde region and also similar towns that are at this altitude ultimately run down and end up impacting the kind of coast. So this trip was really eye-opening, right, to kind of see how the origins of the water that we end up kind of collecting up top here in the cloud forest ultimately end up running down and servicing a lot of the communities that are in those coastal towns. There's Christian looking at these big generators, great. That's Alexis pondering how much wind is powering these windmills, amazing. One of our favorite photos to take.
Everyone's shivering.
This one's cold. And also a great photo from Bikram from the night that we spent down at the Thermal Springs. So the students were able to take these, document them in their sketchbooks through a series of sketches, but also through notes and annotations. So just kind of understanding and collecting their opinions and ideas about what's going on. So this has been part of a 2-year exercise. Again, the first stage is really just understanding the story and visualizing the story so that we can present it back for a larger conversation within the community. So the students within their notebooks kind of challenge a lot of these ideas and thinking about construction, thinking about plants, thinking about the connection of Monteverde to Chomes, for instance. And then ultimately, we also ended up launching off a project from last year that was specifically focused in Chomes. So that group was essentially measuring the tidal changes over the course of the day. In low tide, we can kind of see how far back it is from the buildings and the infrastructure that exists along that town. This is what's happening during high tide. So it's actually coming up to the road and encroaching on the transport route that takes you into this town, but also onto the kind of shoreline in front of those commercial spaces and residential areas. We're projecting, of course, that after we've kind of recovered the data through using AI and also ArcGIS, that in this kind of 50-year flood scenario, that town, because it isn't high enough, will ultimately end up resulting in a scenario like this, where the water is actually able to move above the kind of elevation of the road, but also flooding the kind of first or ground floors of a lot of these buildings. So we split up into 3 different groups, focusing on, again, Monteverde, Chomes, and Morales, and trying to connect these 3 different locations together through identifying their own unique issues, but also how they kind of blend these problems together to tackle them as a collective. I'm going to breeze through this because I know we don't have too much time. So the students made a collective effort to map some of these problems with overlapping data and information. So this was a map by Alexis, Niall, and Leon, overlapping precipitation and rainfall with wind currents, and also understanding where the tributaries are and how they're kind of emerging from Monteverde. So a bit pulled back as a map to understand, again, the connection from the higher regions down to the coast and how water is getting transported down. They then produce these kind of visuals with artificial intelligence to imagine what these scenarios might play out to be. Some of them are pretty gruesome, but again, the point is to kind of explain the extremes of what could happen. Dredging in terms of kind of collecting fish have the potential to destroy a lot of the seabed. We think about flooding in terms of kind of housing infrastructure, extreme droughts as a result of climate change. And these led to hundreds of different iterations of visuals that they'll kind of put in their reports to talk about this story. The other thing that we'll get into, especially for tomorrow, is using the algorithm that we created to talk about data collection in specific to Costa Rica. So the artificial intelligence bot that we have has been trained to specifically gather and analyze data local to Monteverde, Chomes, and Morales, but also the kind of larger body of data that we have for Costa Rica. Out of those kinds of investigations into cited sources and also AI, the students created their own visuals, not with AI, but also not with AI. So thinking about how flooding requires the use of stilts, so these were a bit more kind of imaginative. Thinking about how the fishermen, if it floods, right, ultimately will be fishing from their balconies at some point because of sea level rise. The connection from Monteverde to the coast and the biological corridor. This one was more specifically about the actual data of sea level rise, so projecting into the future how high it's going to rise and how it's going to impact the infrastructure beyond it. This one's a bit more gruesome, but again, telling a story about how when the kind of global environment changes by 1 degree Celsius, it'll cause a shift in animal migration, right? So animals and species moving upwards across the hill or the mountain, and will ultimately end up affecting where they call home. And for us, it'll kind of impact our engagement with those kind of narratives as well. Thinking about mangroves, so we talk about reforestation in Monteverde pretty deeply, but because of coastal development, a lot of the mangroves were taken away, so replanting mangroves as a natural barrier, but also increasing the amount of ecological activity in the water, so attracting larger fishes and shrimp because of these native habitats. This one's a pretty powerful image during a storm surge, right? So thinking about the coastal housing, the kind of people that inhabit those spaces and what happens when they can't do anything about it. So rather than displacing them or moving them, how can we tackle the problem on site has been an attitude. This was a project by Natura Futura in Ecuador that's facing similar solutions. So another thing we were talking about was global narratives. So there's a lot of other locations that are facing similar problems. So maybe instead of just focusing on isolated conditions, can we share a global story and solution in similar conditions that are facing the same kinds of climate effects. So this project essentially thinks about building on the water, so creating a floating house that was realized as a part of these issues of sea level rise in Ecuador, using these barrels underneath to be able to lift the house. And then also thinking beyond just the climate events. So we probably noticed, especially in Costa Rica, things like hurricanes, tropical storms taking place, increased amounts of flooding during the wet season, but also increased amounts of months taking place for the dry season. So last year particularly, I think we had noticed that there was an increase by 2 months in terms of the lack of water that existed in this region. So just kind of pushing beyond to understand the extremes of the story. So the next part of this is just asking the right questions, and I won't go into this, but again, we should prompt these conversations within ourselves as a part of the program, but also as a community. So we think about kind of biocorridors, for instance, pretty predominantly in Monteverde, and we've done a lot of work to be able to preserve and reforest these areas so that we can combat the climate problem. So we're doing a great job here with that kind of attitude of green space and parks and like publicly oriented activities. But maybe we can switch some of this questioning towards how does the cause and effect of development happening at Monteverde affect Chomez and Morales? What are the characteristics of thinking about kind of transportation between these two states? And then also thinking about in 10 years, 20 years, and 50 years time, what does Monteverde look like? What does Chomez look like? What does Morales look like as a result of some of these activities? So these will be in the report for the people to kind of contemplate. We're also thinking about how to adapt existing infrastructure. So rather than, again, demolishing and starting anew, how do we take what's already existing and adapt it and modify it so that it can be resilient towards a lot of these events? So I brought a lot of this stuff up with the community here because Anibal and I have been talking about it quite a bit in terms of the importance of water and the kind of coastal effects. And I just wanted to point out, I think for me, a personal connection. I was able to publish this recently this summer. It talks about building resilience again against extreme weather events. And mainly our global kind of approach to a lot of these topics. It's a critique of our profession really, and I was able to voice my opinions on that. Oftentimes, I have to convince the students, right, that as architects, like we're great designers, we do all these good things, and we're climate warriors, and we can address all these problems. But ultimately, in this text, we talk about having to do it collectively. So this program prides itself on being interdisciplinary, so we can't just solve it as architects, but we need to solve it as planners, environmental designers, civil engineers, right? Also policymakers, so on and so forth. So the article kind of dives into that, and personally for me, it comes out of thinking about, again, like Jordan was talking about in his presentation, being proactive rather than reactive. So my family's from Sri Lanka, and like back in 2004 when the tsunami had hit, it devastated a lot of the coastal region because of that storm surge, and ultimately there was over 47,000 people that had passed away or died, and that was documented, right? So it's probably more than that. So I mentioned this again, not because I want to revisit this event, but rather because it's not an event that I want to take place again, right? So it should be something that we should be preventative about, we should think about, because these things are happening in more frequency as we think about the kind of weather effects, both in North America, but also in Latin America. And oftentimes this means thinking about human activities, the kind of extremist scenarios, and the potential solutions that we can provide for the community here. So this was a number that I brought up with the students. Globally, right, as architects, kind of construction workers and engineers within the built environment, we are the cause of over 37% of global emissions, which makes sense, right, when we source concrete, steel, and all these other kinds of materials. And the increasing rate in which we're building, right, to kind of house people. So shifting that kind of narrative into green architecture, or what does it mean to build with natural materials, or what other systems can we put into place? This seminar doesn't focus on the kind of whole, because we only had time, right, to focus on one aspect of the solution. So we put our time towards thinking about construction methodologies and systems that are also found in Costa Rica already, how to share that knowledge in other locations. So this is a bamboo structure located in Rancho Matatao. Again, already existing in Costa Rica as a kind of prototype for this multi-story building. Thinking about earth as a material for structure and cladding, which ultimately led to a series of precedent research across Latin America, and imagining what the future of these structures might be if we started to develop them here. So the students went through a pretty rigorous one-day workshop in earth block building, using clay and also lime and plaster, and then thinking about how to detail bamboo for structural purposes. And that's coming soon for Thursday. Okay, that was that. So maybe a summary of that is that maybe we should just be having more conversations, right, about the topic and engaging in those debates and figuring out what the kind of priorities are for us as a program, but also for the community. Now we're getting into the exciting part that everyone's here for, the linear park. So again, thanks to the student and also my team members, Stephanie, Gabby, and Anibal, for all the work that they've done to coordinate this program. Again, this is always a team effort, and I'm just here as a spokesperson. I somehow keep being the one that's up on the pedestal, but oftentimes it is merged with a ton of work from Anibal and Gabby, right, and the kind of staff in the institution. So I'm very grateful for, again, the students and the team that I have backing us as we go through some of these exercises. So this is some of the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years, maybe over the past 7 years, in which we've been able to erect about 6 different parks and public spaces. The one that we're focusing on today that we'll see in the next couple of minutes is converting. So for today's project, we are talking about converting municipality into public green space, and then also working at the soccer field that's existing and converting that into a park behind the actual fencing area. What this map ends up showcasing is how sparse the public spaces are, green spaces are, from the kind of central area. So we're using this to kind of convince or change the tide in a way to create a park system in the future, right? So if we can instigate a series of these green spaces as a mentality for the community, we can eventually communicate to the municipality and also other stakeholders that the connection of all of these parks together is something worth pursuing as a part of the kind of planning and development. This is just a recap of 2 projects we did the past 2 years. So Valle Bonito was something that was brought up a couple of times, which feels like a really great fusion of talking with the communities. So we got to talk with the locals there to actually build out the design. Also the kind of municipality and the engineers to retain water on site rather than shedding it into the streets. And also use things like what the students had mentioned, rain gardens, and bioswales and natural plantings to be able to beautify the location and also attract local kind of butterflies and birds as a part of the experience on the park. As you guys also probably already know, we create a series of play structures for the kids of various levels. So creating a place for recreation and repose. So this is the Central Park from last year that got opened. Currently still kind of under development and moving forward, but instigating that project. And then ultimately leads into the objectives for the linear park. So creating a green space, creating areas for observation, socialization, and also accessibility. Here's our site location. For those of you that are familiar with the big soccer field, we are right behind that in this linear strip. And we talked about breaking it up into different segments. So the idea of this park organization quickly evolved from a 1-week charrette. So again, props to the students. Very quick project, right? Oftentimes that we're operating in the 9 weeks period that we have. That led us to kind of bisect the park into 2 sides. So we have a central corridor that's accessible via ramp, and then also the main streets to be able to kind of move across the sidewalk, and then various zones for play, exercise, seating, queuing, and recreation. So a few kind of zoom-ins and isometrics just showcasing the kind of 3-dimensionality of the project. This ramp is accessible from the upper street level. And then finally the seating space at the front. And then I'll just share with you a lot of construction images. So oftentimes when we start these projects, they look like mud pits. And we get very discouraged in the beginning, but for me and Anibal and Gabby and the staff and Jorge and Henry and all the other kinds of stakeholders, we can see the vision. So it takes a lot of time for the students to see the vision, but eventually after kind of trekking through the mud and working hard and kind of evolving it every couple of days, we make incremental progress, again along with the municipality, so thanks to them. The students start testing the structures, right? Gotta make sure it works. learn how to mix concrete themselves. That was a first for a lot of people. Gabian, another key stakeholder in the project, always coming to help us out. Production of the benches. And then over 2 to 3 weeks, right, we start seeing that evolution and transformation. It finally starts becoming a place that we can occupy. We of course use Anibal's kids as the test subject, so we don't get in trouble. So we need to test the park, right? Luckily we're not that far away, so I was nearby, right? Anibal and his wife were also nearby. After we knew that the structures worked, we continued finishing them. We often find ourselves in tight places, literally, metaphorically, maybe. Incredible help from the municipality with their kind of equipment and also their staff. Precision, right? Level is important. And then we start to see the colors emerging, the vibrancy. Again, we have to test out the exercise equipment. Make sure it's good. This is how the students exercise in the morning before they walk up to the institute. And we start to see this transformation of what used to be this mud pit, right, behind the soccer field into something incredible for everyone to enjoy and participate in and be involved in. And we'll see a more final version of this, because I don't have any new photos yet, but I know there's been a lot of development in the past couple of days that we'll get to visit today. So thank you to everyone that's been part of this project, specifically the kind of 3 that have instigated it, which really has to do with the Association de Desarrollo de Santa Elena and the Municipality of Monteverde, and of course the Institute. We can't do this project without all the support, again, from the community members as well. So a lot of people have helped donating their time and also money and finances, right, to actually build these things or materials, for instance. So this doesn't just happen with us, right? I think a lot of people put the tag of Sustainable Futures on these parks, and of course a huge testament to the students, the faculty, and the coordinators for the program, but we are only one small piece of the pie, right? So these things, these kind of visions that we have only get executed with the kind of buy-in from the community, and again, the kind of local people that want to express their opinions about how to push these projects forward. Thank you.
Yo creo que no vamos a tener tantas preguntas para necesariamente. Las preguntas van a surgir allá cuando estemos en el parque, a ver qué les parece. Pero no, este es un espacio para, bueno, replicando un poco lo que mencionó Randy, agradecer, muchas gracias a todos quienes han participado para este último proyecto. Todos los años se une más gente y realmente en ese espíritu, hablamos ahora de hecho con la gente del MISIT, en ese espíritu de colaboración la gente de Monteverde va creando como una confianza. Entonces, cuando uno toca la puerta, mucha gente ha respondido de manera muy positiva para aportar un tubo, un poco de cemento o plata cuando se requiere, y eso es muy halagador. La gente lo cree y, bueno, y eventualmente la respuesta a eso es un proyecto que se ejecuta y un espacio público más que se genera. Nosotros como municipalidad somos muy jóvenes y realmente otros municipios viejos pues, recibieron el beneficio de que Vida o el INDER o otros ministerios donaran tierras. Nosotros hemos tenido que y vamos a tener que seguirlas peleando por nuestra propia cuenta porque no tenemos o no teníamos ningún tipo de espacio, y cada pequeño espacio puede marcar la diferencia. El mirador ahí frente al CPI probablemente podría ser un claro ejemplo. No es gran cosa, pero es algo, ¿verdad? Y ya tenemos un espacio para disfrutar el atardecer. Y esos pequeños parques que hemos venido, intervenciones allá en Valle Bonito o en San Luis, son espacios muy pequeños, pero sí marcan una gran diferencia en la calidad de vida de las personas, un montón. Y ahora en la mañana Jorge estaba por ahí pasando fotos de gente utilizando el parque, y desde ayer, o sea, ya la señora estaba preguntando, bueno, ¿cómo meter? Y yo, espérese que el bajo salga, porque todavía no digo, o sea, estamos a ese nivel, ¿verdad? Entonces realmente la gente sí tiene una expectativa muy grande de estos espacios, y gracias a todos quienes ponen la confianza. Just saying, you know, I don't know if we have questions for this part, but it's more like a comment, I guess, a general comment. Resonating a little bit with what Randy was saying, the trust of the community in this program and the Institute has perpetuated over the years, and now with this build and design projects, or design and build projects, we have been able to give a bit of happiness to these small towns, and these pockets, these parkets, or these lookouts even generate or change the quality of life of the people that live right next to. And we see that even like in this park yesterday, we were finishing, or I was finishing with the backhoe, laying out the gravel, and people were entering and said, can we come in? I said, just let a bit of time for the backhoe to get out, so it's not so risky. But it definitely changes. It definitely changes the life of a lot of people around. And you know, as a community, we'll need to continue this because we do not necessarily have a lot of public land. So those small spaces, it seems something small, but it's huge for us. Because it's us taking over public space, and I think that's a tremendous and important aspect of any community in the world, having more public spaces the way we should be doing this.
Question. Really great to see. Thank you for all of that. So once they're built, who maintains them?
That's a good question. La pregunta es relacionada al tema de mantenimiento con los parques. Una vez que se construye, ¿quién les da mantenimiento? Y es algo que tenemos que trabajar porque si tampoco tenemos una línea necesaria asignada en el presupuesto, en este caso en particular, la Asociación de Desarrollo es quien va a dar mantenimiento. En el caso de algunos de los parques anteriores, es el municipio el que da mantenimiento a los parques como tal, con los recursos que contamos, ¿verdad? Que algunas veces son contados. Eventualmente, yo espero, Dios me dice si no es cierto, contar con una planilla más grande para poder dar un mejor mantenimiento a los espacios. Ahorita es una persona que hace múltiples cosas. So for this particular project, it's the Development Association, Asociación de Desarrollo. They are the ones who own the land, so they will be the ones in charge of giving maintenance to it. For a lot of the other projects, well, we have another one that is also the Development Association of San Luis. But all the rest is the municipality. That being said, the neighbors are a key part of the maintenance of these parks and making sure that things are not falling apart or that some people are using things correctly. And I think that a great example of that is Valle Bonito, the one we visited yesterday, that small one. The neighbors have been putting a lot of effort to keep it pretty well maintained. We just, as of this year, finally got approved our budget as of 2 weeks ago, finally. So we were hoping to see lines in the budget, the municipal budget, so that we can actually have the staff body to maintain these places, because that's a key part of keeping parks running as they should. Joe? Sí, será que vamos a tener presupuesto para eso. No, estoy jodiendo.
Con permiso, era el frente. De esa consulta, pues, es algo muy interesante. Sí se va a asignar una línea presupuestaria, hay que crear un reglamento y ese departamento se llama limpieza de vías y parques. Inclusive se cobra un impuesto por esto para poder mantenerlo. Sin embargo, la experiencia de seguir trabajando en conjunto, que la comunidad, los barrios, instituto, asociación comunitaria, se involucre, se da una apropiación mayor del espacio. Entonces, a pesar de que en algunos momentos vemos el sacar un poco alto en algunos de los espacios, genera que la comunidad participe. Y no queremos motivar de perder esto. En otras comunidades lo que usted encuentra típicamente es al ciudadano diciendo, municipalidad haga, y no se da la integración. Entonces, realmente no ha sido tan malo el no tener la línea presupuestaria, porque nos ha permitido decir muy humildemente, comunidad, necesito de su ayuda, trabaje conmigo, y organizamos los barrios y a veces tenemos a los niños pintando y ayudando en todo este proceso. Creo que eso ha sido un factor muy interesante, y pues hoy en este proyecto se demuestra trabajando la Asociación de Desarrollo de una forma increíble, diciendo este espacio es para la comunidad, pero no están ellos solos ahí, estamos nosotros trabajando articuladamente y viendo a ver cómo ese espacio se le da un uso adecuado. Creo que va a cerrar manos, que los van a limpiar, de pronto va a aparecer alguien que dice quiero sembrar para jardines polinizadores, de pronto aparece alguien donando una banca o reparando algo o pintando, y eso es lo que queremos seguir construyendo en Monteverde.
This is summarizing and saying, actually this discussion is an important question, and it's definitely going to be a line. I mean, it's within the line. I mean, it's like a reglement, like what do you call the reglamento? A policy has to be written down for the line and the budget to show up, and it will come under the maintenance of roads and parks, actually. So there will be some budget there, but actually the experience so far hasn't been that bad in the sense that neighbors assume some of that responsibility, and that gives an additional feeling. People start taking ownership over that particular piece of land, and that's actually something good. Continue promoting that in the community so that anytime that something needs to be maintained or so, people are keeping an eye on the parks itself. And instead of just saying, well, the municipality is in charge of that, they should be keeping it well maintained, clear. I think that's, it's something important in Joe's sense. Don Carlos, ¿alguna palabra de irnos para allá? Don Carlos is the president of the Development Association.
No, primero que todo agradecer a Aníbal, al señor intendente, alcalde, por incluirnos en los proyectos que están llevando a cabo. Ya tenemos como 2 años trabajando, no vez que nos unimos. Hicimos algunas aceras, cañitas creo, y venimos haciendo los años. Y desde la junta directiva de la asociación se encuentra muy contenta de poder cooperar con la comunidad, unirnos, que es muy importante estar unidos, con la municipalidad y el instituto en este caso. Y la idea es seguir con más proyectos. Este sea apenas el inicio de un proyecto que lo necesita mucho Monteverde. Ahora como cantón tenemos que darle más duro porque hay muchas expectativas de que el cantón va a traer desarrollo, y hay que demostrar con la unión de nosotros, la municipalidad, con el instituto y la asociación, llevar a cabo proyectos como estos, que como decía Aníbal ahora, ya está lleno de gente ahí. Hace días se ve gente encima de la arena y todo jugando, entonces se ve que es una necesidad. Y nosotros con campos ahí libres, y yo hace como 2 años que ese campo estaba ahí sin uso, y por qué no hacer un proyecto. Y rapidito yo también me apoyó y ahora eso sería entonces de parte de la asociación, el compañero Rayo y el señor Miguel, y decirles que estamos al menos a seguir ayudando.
Summarizing a little bit of what Carlos says, is on behalf of the board of the Development Association, they want to thank the group, the institute, the municipality for this joint effort between the 3 organizations. This is not the first project. We have been actually working throughout the community fund with Cortima as well, with the sidewalks on the way down to Cañita, so it's not the first time we collaborate. In this case, not only they are serving with the work to build the infrastructure, but they're giving a percentage of what they're making to the project itself. So reinvesting in the community, we're trying to get that. He said, hopefully this is not going to be the last time that we work together, and I'm going to take his word. So the next year, the Development Association becomes, their crew was a critical part of the construction of the project. So having them on hand, just having 9 people there. And it's not only the students, but all the 9 working there. So that's definitely an important piece of that. So thank you, and I think we should be heading down before it gets wet, because it might be the case. Yo estoy diciendo que muchas gracias, don Carlos, Jody. Yo le voy a tomar la palabra a don Carlos para el próximo año.